Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we take a look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, our general joy of being alive. And of course, we have to talk about sustainable design. And today I have a really exciting and interesting guest, Donna Vakalis. Did I pronounce it right, Donna?
You did. That's right.
Wonderful. Donna is an Olympic athlete. She's an Olympian who has gone on to get a PhD in green building engineering, and she's doing really cool things with AI. Donna, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you here.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Donna was very kind. I had to reschedule after a bit of an injury, and Donna was nice enough to allow that reschedule to happen. I appreciate that. Let's start by giving our listeners a chance to get to know you better, Donna. Tell us about the road that led you to work in the world of climate change mitigation, and don't leave out the experience as an Olympian, because I'm sure that has significantly impacted you and shaped your career.
Yeah, so I grew up in around Ontario, Canada. And I had a family that really encouraged me to do swimming in particular. But I guess I don't know if we're going too far back, but basically all that swimming, or as we sort of like jokingly refer to it as chlorine stirring, because at a certain level you're swimming twice a day, every day. And although part of me loved that, part of me also felt it was in conflict. This is my teenage years of like really caring about doing something to improve the world, social justice, climate change, environmentalism, human rights, animal rights. That was a big part of growing up. And I really struggled to find a way to do both. That is, to be an athlete full time and to do something for. In my young, naive world, like those two things were at odds. You couldn't kind of do both to the top of your abilities. That was a naive view, because eventually, you can find ways to combine these things. And so where I ended up training for the Olympics as a pentathlete while I was doing my Master's of Architecture at the University of Toronto. And those things complemented each other fairly well. And then so throughout school, I really loved math and the rigor of, say, translating ideas from the world, which has so many shades of gray, into just something as elegant as a mathematical equation, or having just like these shared language of mathematics that we can bring to bear on whether it's buildings and making good buildings or something else. So there was these traces of an interest in math and applied math, but also caring about making sustainable projects. And that I found sort of fit with going into civil engineering while also continuing to be an athlete. Which, if you're doing athletics at a certain level, it involves a lot of travel. And so it's like a nice perk to be seeing the cities, the urban design, the buildings, and exploring them, from a lot of the global hubs across the world.
That's really cool. And I have to say, before I move on, my youngest, my son, is an aspiring Olympian. He's 10. He's a very good swimmer. And
what stroke is he?
The butterfly, for sure. Yeah. He's got like club records on his 50 and his 100. So he's working on his 200 club record now too. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, good luck.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, back to the show.
Okay.
I don't talk anywhere. I haven't historically talked anywhere near enough about AI, starting to. And so let's dive right in there. You are currently doing postdoc work with the Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute, focused on using AI to improve building performance. You need to tell us more about that work, and tell us a little bit about the Institute too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I am very lucky to be doing postdoc work you correctly named it. It's in Quebec. It's the AI Institute. It's also familiarly called and often called MILA, MILA. And the idea of MILA is that it's one of 3 hubs in Canada. And so as a hub, it's not a single university or professors from a single university. It's actually multiple schools coming together. And so MILA, for example, you will walk in and there will be students and professors based there who are from Concordia or McGill or Polytechnique or Heck or UDM, and which is my home school. And you also have companies who share the building space, and there's a lot of, I don't know, mixing. We're all in a fluid together, mixing ideas and talking to people over snacks because, we'll all be having a snack at the same time or something. Yeah. So the day-to-day idea there is that you do bring together people working on AI. A lot of people there are the top people in the world, I would say. They have expertise in many different facets of AI, and a lot of that is driving kind of world-class fundamental research. I am more of an applied person. Obviously, I came in as an outsider with a buildings background. So I had a PhD in civil engineering, but a long-standing kind of a record of a background that had a lot of holes in it in terms of machine learning and math, but also a lot of some solid foundations in certain sub aspects because I had done courses through undergrad and master's. So I was able to kind of catch up on the math side. And my work I tried to basically look around at MILA and in the world, see what kinds of ML algorithms, so machine learning algorithms, are being developed, and see where's the best fit? How can we leverage these to do better with our either the design phase or the operations phase of buildings? And I think I'll stop there, and then you can ask more pointed questions if you want, because that's a kind of an abstract level.
Yeah, let's dive a little deeper. So let's talk specifically, let's talk design phase first. Can you give us any specific applications in design phase of where AI has been valuable in creating a better building?
I can. I think that I'm going to keep it a little bit brief because although I have looked into this, I'm not actively researching it right now. But I would say a nice example of generative AI for design phase is to enable us. Let me just set the stage for like how we do things and then how we could do things. So how we do things. If you come to someone, maybe you're doing a building energy model and you say, I want to see how much energy this design will use typically like over a year, right? And as you know, you might use, say, an Energy Plus model and say, okay, we're going to run a simulation for these options. And then someone says, okay, well, I would rather have this other design component. So you change it and you see how much energy that would use. There's this kind of forward loop where you decide on the components and then you see how much energy it takes, right? So you kind of have to decide on your palette of options ahead of time, and then you see how much energy, and then you can compare them, which is great. I would say a very useful tool that AI enables is to work backwards and to instead say, okay, what is the lowest energy way we can achieve this? We can say, what is the lowest energy way we can have this window to wall ratio and this, I don't know, these other aspects, these other constraints. And then it can just, working backwards, kind of give you the optimal solutions. So instead of kind of throwing, sorry, I just need a better analogy, but instead of like throwing your darts and see where they land, you can say, I want a dart that lands right in the middle there. Show me how I have to throw it. I guess it's
Right.
yeah.
Or we used to say, shoot the arrow at the tree and then go up and paint the target.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So ideas like that work for at the design stage. So if you could imagine, you could offer someone lots of options they may not have conceived of on their own. It's especially useful if there's some surprising option that an expert wouldn't have otherwise guessed.
Now, let's talk about the parameters a little bit. I mean, one of my favorite topics on this show is the trade-offs, right? Between energy and say that like the human health aspects. The obvious
Yes.
one, since you mentioned window to wall ratio, the obvious ones are view and natural light are important for our health and for our productivity, but they run counter to maximizing energy, right? So it becomes, is energy the most important thing, or can it be balanced, or is there a way to achieve both simultaneously? Is AI able to help with that sort of, I'll say, trade-off scenario?
So the answer is both yes and no. I think you had Dorit on who did a really good job
Yes.
of explaining. I really liked the way she explained that, we've locked ourselves into this trade-off by starting off by having our heating and cooling approach, our whole approach be based on these forced air systems. And because we're in a forced air system of a sealed building, say, then, the energy, there's a trade-off with, say, between air quality and energy, but even to a certain extent, maybe between daylighting and energy because of the way we heat our buildings. So in that sense, if I were to think like, will AI help us with that? Like you're asking, will AI help us, culturally move towards buildings that use, say, radiant heat techniques? Well, it can help us once we know we want to implement radiant heat and help us with design decisions and design support. But the big lift, the heavy lift, I think there is not technical. I think it's making people want those things or like choosing those things. And that's a bigger question than just AI. Like, how do you get people to choose the building that is going to be, more energy efficient? I don't have the answer to that question, but like if I did, I would love to go into that field to
Yeah,
get
no,
people to make those design decisions that, it's not just a technical thing. So the answer is yes and no in that. Yes, AI can definitely help. Once you've maybe this is where you were going with the question, but let's say you are going to design a building, it's going to have a forced air system for heating and cooling, and you're in a climate where the outdoor weather is very different from the indoor climate. And let's say people want a set point that is the delta is big between indoors and outdoors. And now, yes, knowing what materials you use, including the quality of your approach to lighting and daylighting, each of those things will have both an energy cost, but a human benefit that we put a number on. And if you can put a number on it, you can use a calculator or an algorithm or software. It doesn't have to be AI, but it can be, to help you get at like optimization. But I feel like the optimization is the easy part. The hard part is putting the right numbers in the first place. And then the really hard part is convincing people who maybe, not to I'm going to pick, people are going to get mad at me, but who really want a marble countertop but don't really care about the greenhouse gas emissions. You need to also make something for them where hopefully they will choose the energy responsible version and still get their marble countertop.
Yeah, there's the education of the consumer, of the building owner is a big part of it. It's interesting. And you made a really good point at the beginning, which I'm going to repeat, like as you started the answer. I mean, if you break some of the paradigms of how we're heating, cooling, protecting, then some of those conflicts just go away, right? They just go away, which is really, a very profound point. And I appreciate that. And by the way, I should mention, Donna was speaking of Dorit. That's Dr. Dorit Aviv, who's been on this.
I don't know when this episode will come out. We should all go and listen to her episode. And
it recently released. Yeah, Dorit's is one that you definitely want to listen to for sure. Manage the connection between building occupants and the outside world using Solera translucent glass. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit, Donna. I want to talk about Racing to Zero. You are a former scientific lead, and currently you're a board member, I believe, with an organization called Racing to Zero. I can probably guess what it's about, but let's just to be sure, tell us what the organization's all about, what the goals are, and how you're going about achieving those goals.
Yeah, so Racing to Zero was co-founded by Shay and Oliver, who are also Olympians. Shay was a track and field athlete who also crossed over into bobsled. Oliver was in field hockey, and very early on, I jumped on along with Martha McCabe, another Olympian. So this was a not-for-profit driven and envisioned by Olympians to basically move the needle in how sports are, how sports and mostly events, but also how teams and sports organizations, the environment, and in particular, we're really focused on climate change, but not just climate change. So let me give you an example. So a track meet might be held, and there's a lot of ways you can run a track meet. And there are decisions that you make that can really impact how much waste there will be, how much greenhouse gases will be associated with people traveling to and from the event and in between maybe the hotel and the event. There's little decisions that the organizer can make, but there wasn't really someone there to guide them. And we basically set it up to give a chance to sports organizations from the grassroots level to the elite level to sort of become aware of all the design choices they have at their fingertips and then figure out which ones they could afford or which ones would save them money and really measure their footprint. The organization, it's still led by Olympians and Paralympians, and it's really, I feel like, I know your podcast listeners are in the buildings world, but buildings factor directly into this when you consider the arenas and, the community centers that are hosting these sports. So the buildings are a piece of that, but it's a really complex kind of like system-wide thinking. You have to think about how the athletes are getting to and from the competition. That's a big one. Also, how the building is being operated. Say you're a curling event. Are there things you can do with the HVAC and to still have really good ice?
Yeah.
Speaking to Canadians.
Yeah.
There's like a big need there and a big desire from talking to these sports organizations. But remember that these organizations aren't, necessarily swimming in pools of money either. So the challenge has been to do this well and to do it in a way that is feasible.
Right. You know what? Just for fun, I'm going to talk about swimming again.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So colder pools means slower times, right? As I
there's
understand.
like a sweet spot for temperature. Also, hotter pools are also slower. So it's a U-shaped
Okay.
curve, right?
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize it was an
Yeah.
optimization. So is that something that is talked about within the Racing to Zero, or just curious?
Yeah, it would be. We haven't done any work with a swim with like FINA or the Swim Canada, at least not as far as I'm aware. I mean, maybe they have something in the works, but we haven't done a pool-based event yet.
Okay. Just curious.
So I would say we would look at the amount of energy used to heat and cool that body of water during the competition. We wouldn't recommend anything that would reduce performance. I think we would look at if, say, having like just the right temperature required and, a bump in energy use, we would probably look really seriously in how to offset that in other ways with how the rest of the building is conditioned at that time or something.
Love it. Okay. Now, just specifically your role as scientific lead, what did you do? Like, what does the scientific lead do in that organization?
Yeah, we really wanted, I mentioned that we were all from a sports background, but we all also have these really diverse professional backgrounds at the same time. So Shay's an electrical engineer. Ollie is a business person. Martha's also in business and has done her own successful startups. And Erin now, who's a Paralympian, who's on the board, she is very successful in ESG and banking. So we all have, and my expertise happened to be more on the science side. So my contribution as a science lead was really making sure that, first of all, we were doing greenhouse gas accounting. And just like financial accounting, it has protocols and rules to follow to make sure everyone's on the same page. So you can compare apples to apples or swimming pools to swimming pools. So I was really making sure that we followed the protocols, for example, for greenhouse gas accounting properly and thinking about the right emissions factors, which is a little bit maybe in the weeds for some people, but it's saying like we need to all use the same accounting methods and the same currency to compare things. And so I was basically trying to do that.
Right on. Okay. You did some work that I want to do a little deeper dive on. I'm not sure if it's going to be relevant, but let's give it a shot. I live in Nova Scotia. All right. And we still generate, the majority of our electrical generation is done by burning coal. True fact. So there's some history. I mean, this was a coal mining part of the world. And so when it was cheap and easy to get coal out of the ground, we built all of our electrical generation around burning coal. And now we're in a bit of a bind trying to make the transition. Now, you were involved in coal phase out with Ontario Power Generation through the U of T, I believe. Can you tell us about your role in the coal phase out, in very broad terms, how that played out?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I have my partners from Nova Scotia. So we have like Nova Scotian family members. Shout out to them. And for Ontario, when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor, a lot of the time people in academia are hired on contracts to sort of support things that are happening in industry and government. And so she was hired to help look at the different options for the phase out. At that point, they had already decided, we want to keep as much infrastructure as possible. So we want to keep our power plants. But what would it cost And is it feasible to reuse them? If we like, what could we even do that? Like, what could we use them for that would be replace some of the jobs that are being displaced and generate the energy in a better way? So we did an analysis that specifically looked at wood pellets. So you'd take wood, and that could be wood that was actually like there's actually in our analysis we looked at different qualities of wood, because you can harvest kind of like the wood that is not the nice wood for making really nice timber, really nice planks. Some of that can still be used, and it would normally be left on the ground, or now it's been some years, so like I'm forgetting all the terminology, but basically they wanted to see, could wood pellets do the job? And if so, what exactly would be the environmental cost of using wood pellets? Because we could take them from Ontario, we could take them from BC, and those would be two very different scenarios in terms of the cost, and not just the financial cost, but the energy and emissions cost of transporting things across the country. And it wasn't just within Canada. We looked at options outside of Canada as well, say Norway, and then they could come across by ship. So we looked at the full life cycle cost in terms of money to get the wood pellets from different scenarios, also in terms of greenhouse gases and air quality, because when you're burning wood pellets on site versus burning coal, you still want to compare the air quality emissions. So yeah, we basically gave them a life cycle assessment report to help policymakers decide. But I would say I was like low down on the, I don't know if it's actually correct to say like higher up on the totem pole or lower down on the totem pole, but I was the least important person in the sense that, my supervisor knew a lot and I was helping her do the analysis.
Oh, well, okay. So let's talk about carbon then. I mean, embodied carbon in wood pellets versus coal. How do they compare? I mean, you're cutting down trees that are normally a carbon sink, or are we talking about waste wood? How do we get the carbon balance right, Donna?
Oh gosh, I actually feel like I don't have the
Okay.
expertise to answer this question. I would refer you to people, which I am so sorry because I know this is
No,
an
it's
interview
okay.
show. So like, but I would be speaking out of turn if I said, this is what we need. Yeah.
I'm just
Sorry.
curious if it's
Yeah.
because I mean, it'd
In
be
the
the same amount of
TLDRs,
carbon ultimately, but if the fact that it's renewable, that should result in a lower total carbon footprint, right?
yeah, and lower total carbon footprint. And there is the reality that you have to make assumptions about what would have happened with that coal or what would have happened with that wood
Right.
to know the total life cycle cost. So depending on your assumptions, your numbers will be different, but overall, the winner is still the wood pellets.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the question. That's the ultimate
Yeah.
question. All right.
Yeah.
That's a good answer, and that's what I needed to know. Okay, I got to change again. You've had a very eclectic life, and I absolutely love it. So let's talk
No,
about the
thanks.
work you did. No,
That's
I
a
love
kind
it.
characterization.
And an
Okay.
accurate one, I believe. Let's talk about the work you did with Sustainable Buildings Canada. I had never heard about the organization until I started preparing for this episode. Can you tell
So
us what the mandate for Sustainable Buildings Canada is, how it's funded, and the role that you played there?
okay, I'll start with my role because that might help
Okay.
understand my understanding of the organization. So I came to know Sustainable Buildings Canada because they were holding integrated design charrettes. So a design charrette, as many of your listeners are probably familiar with, you get people around the table, hopefully early on in the design stages, where disciplines that might make decisions on their own, typically, say your mechanical engineers and your architects who are thinking still quite early on, mostly about, maybe just massing of the building, and you also have maybe your building owner who's there, maybe even the building operator, if like, or some kind of, basically you bring to the table a large group of stakeholders who are each representing different aspects of what's important about this building. You bring them in all at once so that when you're discussing some early design decisions, the trade-offs become apparent, hopefully right away. So if someone makes a suggestion and in their realm, let's say for, I don't know, for sake, like for the massing, we should orient the building this way and we'll have it like this. And then maybe the mechanical engineer says, oh, hey, does that leave enough space for like, is the system going to fit in the closet or on the roof? And then there's this back and forth immediate dialogue. And I was brought in because Sustainable Buildings Canada hosted these charrettes for their project specific, and they needed expertise on indoor air quality and energy efficiency. And a lot of my PhD focused on those aspects. So energy efficiency, check. Yes, we need that. And we need good indoor air quality. It's not okay to just like throw out one of those. So I was there in the capacity at these design charrettes to kind of look at the project, talk about opportunities for good indoor air quality and good energy efficiency at the same time. And those charrettes were a regular part of Sustainable Buildings Canada mandate. I haven't gone back to I wasn't involved at the board level, so I couldn't really speak to what their whole structure is and their whole MO, but I know a big part of what they do is around education and directly getting involved with people who are developing real buildings. So looking at the design drawings together, coming around the table, bringing in experts, giving free to them advice. So Sustainable Buildings Canada paid the experts with no strings attached. Like we would just give them honest advice. And I don't know exactly how they got all their funding. I know some of it comes through mandated programs where the gas provider in Ontario, or for that region, wherever they were holding the charrette, has to donate a certain amount of funding, I believe, to reducing and like weaning buildings off natural gas. So a lot of the talk would be about how to electrify buildings. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer. There's probably some pieces that I didn't answer, but
that's a great answer, Donna. That's a terrific answer.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I know. I really appreciate that. And I love that we're able to help people in this transition because, sometimes that expertise is very expensive. So that's a nice model.
Yeah. And personally, as someone who was training at the time, like training full time and trying to work and study, getting these little opportunities to consult and also look at how I could take what I had learned really largely in academia and apply it in practice and learn so much from, I was teaching them things that I had learned, but they were teaching me as well because I was absorbing what things does a building owner care about? What does a typical building owner need to worry about? All of those things are really important. And so I was being schooled at the same time and being paid for it. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's lovely to learn and get paid at the same time. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Let's swing back to AI, Donna. Talk about potentially huge sort of conflicts. First of all, how else will AI impact the building industry, do you think? Where's it going to make the biggest impacts?
Something people have been looking at for, I think, a long time, long before I arrived in this space, is really building controls. Because, there's been so many great metaphors for what a building is. One famous one is it's a machine, right? It is maybe today more than ever. Some buildings, not all buildings need to be this way, but some are really like sophisticated robots. And so from that lens, we can have sophisticated controls, and those controls will be performed by artificial intelligence. That's a big part of where my research is going right now. And like with the caveat, like we said earlier, there's choices we can make ahead of time that are more fundamental about what makes a good, responsible building. And if one does go the route or have the type of building that requires very sophisticated controls, then I am very confident, sure, about the fact that AI can do a really much better job at balancing energy efficiency with keeping people either comfortable or safe, or like it depends on the building, right? So like you said, like keeping the pool at the right temperature or keeping the classroom at the right temperature for students writing an exam, or keeping the hospital at like the right amount of clean air and also the most efficiently. All of these things, we can use tools like AI to do them better than we do them now.
Right on. This just popped into my head, I swear.
Yeah.
But have we ever used AI, or has anybody incorporated the weather into building controls. I've always been fascinated by that. Like everything's a feedback loop in the way we manage buildings, when we could have a feed forward component because we have really good ideas of what's happening outside, which, if it's a cloudy day, you're going to have less solar heat gain than you are on a sunny day. And if it's really cold out, you're going to have more rapid heat loss. And we know approximately what the daytime highs and the nighttime lows are going to be. Is that being tied in with AI or
Yes.
building controls? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you described it for me, so I didn't have to. That's exactly one of the advantages, is that, like you described, there's a possibility of doing a feedback loop that is always checking in the moment, like a thermostat. Am I above or below my constraint? Okay, heat up, heat down. It's reacting in the moment and doing a decent job. And people are familiar with the thermostat. What a thermostat can't do is, like you said, say, okay, a lot of people are coming into work in an hour and going to heat up the building. And maybe we also know, like you said, we know the weather forecast. It's actually due to be a really hot day today. But right now it's really cool out. So why not pre-cool the building? And by the way, it can also factor in the cost of energy if you're on a grid that does charge by time of day. And those are usually proxies for how dirty the grid is or how much it matters to the grid operator to have peak shavings. So those signals from the grid operator via pricing of, like, here's when electricity is expensive or cheap, an AI algorithm can absolutely factor that in to still get you the same amount of comfort, but maybe it will turn out to be the same solution you would have thought of by your expert, say, who designed the system. But it can also has a chance of, in the moment, figuring out what is the cheapest, cleanest, best way to do it for that day and for that hour and for that room. And so that's really where we're going. However, we're not going there very quickly because there's still a lot of challenges. It's like one of those things where we know we can do it. And some of the challenges are not just in the space of writing like a good AI system. Good also has to be interpretable to a building manager. It also has to be acceptable and palatable to a building operator who's never done this before, who has a way of working that's worked so far, good enough, but depending on what good enough is. So, I think we're in a transition time, and I think AI people have really good ideas that are going to work and make our buildings better, but there's going to be this long transition while we figure out how to get from the world of it works in simulation, it works in test cases in buildings, but like a really wide, massive deployment.
Short lifespan, single-use plastic glazing is not a sustainable solution for daylighting. Solera is the glass-based alternative for the new millennium. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Okay, let's talk about what I think is one of the most controversial aspects of AI.
Sure.
And it's not, the robots taking over the world or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
lots of people are talking about that. What I want to talk about is energy consumption. AI is incredibly, it's microprocessor intensive, it's memory intensive. So it's very energy intensive. That's a serious trade-off balancing act. Are you looking at that? Is that something that comes into the thought processes of people doing this sort of research that you're doing?
Yes. And I think, so I'm co-supervised by Joshua Bengio and David Rolnick at MILA. And they both have a lot of really articulate and very great answers to this question. And I'm just going to give my own little version of the answer to this question. I think, so yes, I think it's great that we're thinking about the energy intensiveness of AI. I think I want to step back a level and say, I think people's worries about AI energy use really should be focused on some of the models that use a lot of energy. And those are the large language models that take a curse word ton of energy at training and inference time. And that's a certain class of model. That doesn't mean that someone who's focused on sustainable applications for controllers like the RL in your building, which is a relatively much smaller model for controlling the building, or many other sustainability applications for AI, from agriculture to forestry to biodiversity to social good. Those models can be quite small, And so we really do need to pay attention to the energy use, but it applies to a certain category of model and application, not to AI writ large.
Okay.
So I do think, yes, we need to worry about the energy intensiveness. And I mean, coming back to like one of the pieces of making at least the climate impact less would be to transition to renewable power, which we do need that transition. And then the
Right.
net impact of AI, like some of these most consuming models, more broadly can be maybe less harmful. I think
Excellent.
that this
Keep
isn't
going.
maybe exactly what you were asking, but I think hand in hand with like the energy penalty and the harmfulness, AI can be quite okay. It can be used unsustainably. It can be used like it can be directly wasteful in terms of energy, but it can be also corrosive in terms of, say, our day to day manipulating people, hurting. This is like a big issue right now, like actually hurting us in terms of our democracy. And so we need guardrails, both in terms of, I guess, both in terms of like the environmental impacts, but also the social impacts. So I don't know. We could talk about that for a long time too. I know we have a limited amount of time, but for me, it's not like buildings are here and the bigger picture for AI is here. I really feel like in general, we want like the right policy frameworks so that when we have AI, which can drive these incredible innovations like energy efficient building design and optimized resource management, we don't get them being misused, that they contribute positively.
So the AI generated videos of Donald Trump scrapping with Vladimir Zelensky at a press conference, they're probably not the best use of energy for this tool.
Yeah, I feel
This is
like,
nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
yeah,
And
I think
worse than nonsense. Like there's people who believe that these things happen. There's people who believe some of the videos that are just obviously being generated by AI.
that's
It's
really
frightening.
concerning.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
concerning, like, so that's already happening. And
Yep.
we don't have an idea of how we're going to get ourselves out of that. I mean, like, it's one thing to see some damage happening and say, okay, we need to deploy, the firefighters, but we don't have firefighters in this case. Like,
Right.
the fire is just growing.
Right.
So, yeah. And I think this is, you know, yeah, this is my own personal view, but like, this is a bigger issue that we've had before AI, where some people are going to have a lot of power and they're going to use AI or some other tool to kind of get what they want. And we have to like communally come up with this consensus, maybe like maybe policies to say like, no, this is what is going to be best more broadly for everyone, not just say someone who owns the company that generates the LLM that controls
Right,
it.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said that we would hit a point, and he said this a few years ago, that we would hit a point where we have no ability to distinguish fact from fiction on the internet. But his prediction was that the internet would die
Oh, really? Okay.
when we were utterly incapable of, determining whether something is true or not that we read on the internet, which is basically where we are, that it would die. Now that obviously hasn't happened yet, but there's a little part of
Yeah.
me that's kind of going, maybe that's what should happen.
Yeah.
But
I can see the logic in that. Like if you don't trust what's in front of your eyes, if you're looking at it, it's for a different reason. Maybe are we looking at the internet for different reasons now than getting a trusted source of information? It's maybe more for entertainment because we can't trust it. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't die, but it dies in its former, what it could have been, and something else replaces
yeah, right.
it.
Hope you're right. Absolutely. Okay, Donna, every episode I ask one question that's the same in every single episode, and I ask my guests to answer from whatever perspective they'd like. So here goes. What makes a great building?
Okay. I think that a great building is great for users and great for the community and doesn't trade off one for the other. So I think the specifics depend on the type of building. So if you have an apartment building or a school or an art gallery, right, what makes it great for the users is going to be different. But broadly, it doesn't trade off having a great user experience for some other responsibility to the community. And to expand on that a bit, like you can see it also at different scales. Like a great building is great from far away and also from close up because it gives you something different at each scale. And yeah, and hopefully puts a little song in your heart.
I like that. This is the first time anyone's ever mentioned scale, so I appreciate that, and I love the little song in your heart. That's wonderful. Donna, before we go, do you have
I
any
have kids, so that's like,
I get
the
it.
kids are probably influence my way of thinking now.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing,
Yeah.
and I hope more people feel the same way. Do you have any news or any announcements that you'd like to share, Donna?
No, I don't have any news or announcements. I'm basically, depending on when this comes out, I'll be finishing my postdoc at the end of August. So I will be looking for my next place to like where I will fit in the world. And I always welcome new connections. So yeah, I guess I'm open to people reaching out just for a coffee chat or like thinking about things and bouncing ideas around. But
What's the best way to get a hold of you for the coffee chat, Donna?
Oh, my email. So maybe you can just post it in the link.
In a link. Will do.
Donna.Vakalis at Olympian.org.
Perfect.
So first name dot last name @ Olympian.org.
Cool. Very cool. Donna, thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I keep up the good work. I'm also, can I just ask you, has anyone flipped it and asked you like what your answer is to the great building?
Oh.
What makes a great building?
No, nobody ever has, and I'm
Can I
flattered.
put you on the spot?
Yeah, let's do it. Look, I think it's a building that balances all of the components. You have to have suitability for function. You have to have flexibility for future functions. You have to have comfort. You have to take into account context and community. And ultimately, you have to create something that people want to be part of. When I think about, it was Jeremy Noel said, it's love, right? And so if a building is built with love and concern for everything and everyone that it impacts, then, and that includes beauty. Let me make sure that I don't leave beauty out of there. As Alison Brooks says, never compromise beauty. And I believe that too. So yeah, when people are designing and they don't make the conscious decision to leave out a bunch of stakeholders or leave out a bunch of important aspects, that's when we create great buildings.
Yeah.
Good connection to the outdoors, good connections to the community. Lots of daylight, of course.
I had to just be explicit about that one.
Always. Oh, hey, it's my world. Donna, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. You take care.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.